Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Casual Sports Podcast. As always, I'm Alec Cabrera. That's Mike Wolfgang. We got sports to talk about. Mike, not a ton going on in sports desk. Obviously, we were kind of bouncing around yesterday, All-Star game, all those festivities going on. We did, however, get some international sports news coming out over the last 2 days that we haven't gone into, both involving the Olympics, actually. So the Olympic Games that were, I believe, supposed to be this year were pushed back, obviously, a little early on due to COVID restrictions. They officially announced that the Asian Games will start in September of 2023. So we're going to have 2 odd years for Olympics. We had 2021, now 2023. But Los Angeles has begun their 6-year countdown clock. Starting now, they'll be ready July 14th, 2028, LA Games as well. So we had that international sports news come out. The other one hits a little bit closer to home. After 110 years, Jim Thorpe has been reinstated as the gold medal winner for the 1912 Olympics. He had the medal stripped from him 110 years ago after it came out to the IOC that Jim Thorpe had been paid to play minor league baseball, violating his amateur status as an athlete back when those restrictions were a lot tighter. But they've since gone back and have now reinstated Jim Thorpe as a champion. So that was pretty big news. He was stripped of 2 gold medals. One was for the decathlon, and then the other one was for the pentathlon. So pretty big news. Figured that's a good one to share. And then we got a little bit more local news that I think might bring us some talking points here a little bit. Wish Matt was here. There's a little bit more his area, but it's big news coming from NASCAR. NASCAR has joined IMSA in Chicago for a race on the streets in downtown Chicago. IMSA has already done some street racing throughout Chicago. NASCAR is now joining them. It's going to be a double feature type weekend with both events running on the streets of downtown Chicago. It's also going to be 75th year of NASCAR. So it's going to be a big season, but NASCAR is going to Chicago. And this is kind of one of those things. We've seen road courses, sure, but we've never seen street courses from NASCAR before. That's been a thing more reserved, not even as much IMSA, but more, overseas with F1 style racing. They do a lot of that street racing. And NASCAR is joining the field. I thought this was a very interesting development because we've kind of seen NASCAR have the shift in recent years to make their cars a little bit more like, F1, IMSA style, going into the one nut change and changing up how the cars are performing as well. NASCAR is trying to modernize their stock cars to fit into a new audience, and they're hoping bringing it to Chicago and putting it downtown instead of the old Chicagoland Speedway. It's about 45 minutes south of downtown, where they hosted the first round of the playoffs from 2011 to 2018, is that they're going to draw in a lot more fans. Mike, I think this is really interesting to see a race in downtown Chicago for NASCAR. My only thing is we better not have a big wreck because there's going to be some destroyed buildings if that happens.
That's a cool setting that it brings. Like you said, it's being in a city. Let's hope there's no wrecks, like you said, but I think
no major wrecks. You can have some small ones, but even with how small, the streets are going to be, probably not a ton of passing in a lot of it. I think a lot of these guys are going to be trying to figure it out when on pit strategy. Other thing is, where are the fans going to sit along these street roads?
Well, and I think I think they're going to try to start doing this type of stuff because I know it wasn't NASCAR. We've seen races down in Miami, the one they had a couple at the beginning of summer. They had ones around the Dolphin Stadium. I think they're going to start doing stuff like that, and I kind of like it.
The Coliseum earlier this year with NASCAR as well, and they did announce they will return for that next year as well.
Yeah, it's a cool type of setting. Like you said, the type of environment that's going to draw in fans is going to have to remain to be seen because where are you going to have all these people at? There's going to be a lot of people that are going to want to see it. A lot of people in the city who travel to Chicago who might want to stop and see it.
Right. That's the big thing as well. It's not just going to be the fans that are there. It's going to be some fans that I think are some people in Chicago like, well, there's an NASCAR race down the road. I'm going to go walk over and look. And that's a big thing when you put something in this type of setting, is that it kind of opens the door for some people just to, peek over a fence and see what's going on over there. What's making this loud noise in already a loud Chicago? No one's going to be sleeping if they go past an apartment building.
Yeah, and obviously it's a type of city that you want to have these type of. If you're trying it out, you want to have it in a city type like that, because Chicago is a destination city. It's one of the bigger ones. So, it's a good type of thing to try it out there and see if you can't get like a good draw in Chicago. There's not too many other cities you're going to get good draws in. So it's a really good type of feel out thing that, hey, if we can do good in bigger cities, maybe soon we can try to venture out into smaller markets that are still big cities, like the ones around us, like Cleveland, Pittsburgh. But
if you could find a way, maybe Columbus, open the door for Pittsburgh, going down places in Kentucky, or even Miami, like you already mentioned, is a place that has seen races there. New York, probably the next biggest one, if they can find a route that would actually work. The only problem is those streets are even tighter than Chicago, so that would be interesting. But can you imagine doing a race on Manhattan Island with the Statue of Liberty as the backdrop?
Oh, I'd be sick.
Doesn't get any more American than that.
I was just
watching NASCAR with the Statue of Liberty in the background.
All the other stuff too, the bridges and
right.
That'd be sweet. But how you gonna do it?
Trade center they got up there. I mean, then that would just scream America if they could find a way to do that.
Yep. It'd be cool to try it out. So I hope this one does well. I actually do.
Yeah, this is one of those races I think a lot of people are going to tune into, because it doesn't seem as boring as the Coliseum. They did it on a football field, basically. There wasn't a lot of passing, had a couple exciting moments in it, but didn't really do much for the audience, I think, in a lot of ways. They've introduced another dirt track at Bristol, extended, I think, another road course at Watkins Glen. I think they put a second one up there with a different course change on it. So now NASCAR is trying to revolutionize the way they're going, and I think it's good, because it really looked here for a while that they were dying out. But to see them trying to make these change-ups, at least for a time, I mean, this kind of life alert that they're jumping on, going, all right, we need to start trying something before we're too far down in the muck. NASCAR is probably not something that will ever go away entirely, but we could see it return to more of a stock route, as you see, kind of around here, just up Sharon Speedway, some, sprint cars, that kind of thing. NASCAR's time in the limelight might be coming down, but I like to see that they're still trying new things, trying to kind of reinvigorate their audience, because a lot of that audience that they've held on to has left in recent years due to, the political reason stuff that's come out from NASCAR, everything to do with that. And they're not grabbing new audience members, because not a lot of people want to sit around for 3-4 hours watching cars go in a circle. No offense to those drivers, it's very hard, but it's also very hard for an audience to, stay there for 3 hours. And I lost my camera again. I'm back.
You finished up yet, or?
Yeah, I'm good. I don't know why my camera keeps trying to switch over to like OBS, and I don't know why, because I don't even have OBS open.
I was just gonna say that's the type of thing, because, like you said, it's hard for NASCAR drivers, but you even say stuff about baseball too. Yeah, it's hard. It's a fun game, but when you're sitting there in a couple hours and it's the same thing going on, it does get. I'm a huge baseball guy. I love it, but it does get. I'll admit it gets boring at times. We all know that, and I think it's a thing with NASCAR too. Is that's what drives people. But it's just a different transition now. Like you said, you're going to be trying different things. Every sport's going through that. And it seems like the last couple of years, every sport's going through it at the same time. You're going to have to make some transition, make some changes. It doesn't mean anything's wrong. I mean, we talked about yesterday with the All-Star game in baseball. They made home run derby if there's extra innings. That's the type of change. Changes are going to happen.
Which they didn't need to, because Cleveland's very own Emmanuel Clase clutched it up. Almost put together an immaculate save as well. Very close.
Yeah, it was great.
But it was good. He struck out 3 guys with a 99-mile-an-hour cutter, a 100-mile-an-hour cutter against Schwarber, and then a 99-mile-an-hour cutter to finish off the inning. And it's just, we're looking at the next Chapman, I think, when you look at that closing level of dominance. I think baseball has lacked a little bit since Chapman has slowed down in his older years. Having somebody that can come in with a 100-mile-an-hour pitch, and especially Chapman did that with a straight fastball. Now you're throwing a cut fastball down there. That's impossible to touch. If Clase continues to develop, he's going to be the best closing pitcher in baseball very quickly.
They had a good showing yesterday, too. That nice play by Jimenez at short. I think he was playing second, right?
Yeah, he was at second. He flipped it behind his back over to second as I just take down my decorations.
You're taking him down anyways.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, Cleveland saw some good moves, and Jose Ramirez went 2 for 2, got an RBI, I think, and a home run, maybe. I don't remember exactly what the stat line was from last night, but he had a good showing as well.
There really wasn't much offensive action. I think there was only AL side. I think all three of their hits or runs were on home runs.
Yeah.
Stanton had 2, and he won the MVP. So,
yeah, great performance by Stanton. I mean, especially because I was kind of criticizing before the game. Oh, he's a good player, I guess, but there's no one I would particularly, go for. Then he goes out there, wins the, All-Star Game MVP, puts up 2 home runs on the best pitchers in baseball, who obviously aren't always throwing their best stuff, except for Emmanuel Clase, because he wanted that immaculate inning. He was hunting for it. He was close.
Wait. Stanton had 1 home run, and Byron Buxton had 1. I'm trying to find out how they got the other run, but that's beside the point.
I think it came off the bat of Jose.
Yeah, he did something. I'm trying to look at it, but it's hard to look at this box score because there's like 3 guys to substitute them out because they try to play everybody, so it's kind of hard to look at it. But no, that was entertaining yesterday. I didn't watch the entire game, but I saw those nice plays, and that play by Jimenez and then that save, that was pretty nice.
Yeah, it was definitely a good day for Cleveland. I didn't really see the All-Star game. I was busy last night, but I mean, I love to see Cleveland perform on a high level like that, especially because there were a lot of Indians at the time that had a good showing during the Cleveland games a couple years ago. So I like to see us at the top level against the best competition in the world. It's what you want to see out of your team because you have those kind of guys that can compete with that high level, especially when 2 of them are younger guys like Jimenez and Clase. Then you got old reliable and Jose.
Yeah.
It really builds for a bright future, and it kind of reminds you a little bit of those teams we had in the late 10s of the last decade for Cleveland that were dominant all around, had great infielders and decent outfields, but they could hit the ball and they had great pitching to go with it. It reminds you of those World Series teams Cleveland was putting together.
Well, and not to get too far off from the All-Star game, but since you're talking about the young part of it too, I was talking to Matt yesterday after the draft because me and him were texting back and forth because a couple of Scrappers guys got drafted yesterday. I just wanted to point that out too as well. But as you're talking about these young guys too, and I often try to, when I'm talking about my team on the show, I like to bring up the minor leagues because that's where their future is right now. And I wouldn't say so much for Cleveland right now because they're being more competitive right now, but they still have a lot of guys in their minor league system. The draft just happened too, and they built up themselves too. I forget what the position they picked it. I think it was an outfielder with the first pick, but I think both teams.
Good move. That's the most needed spot on the field. So
yeah, and I think both teams that we both like on the show had good drafts. I think going into it, I didn't really know because I was more into the draft last year with my team because it was the actual start of the rebuild. This one actually mattered a little bit more for them too because it was you're going to determine who's at the trade deadline's coming up. You're going to determine who's going to be on the roster to finish out the year and maybe for next year too as well. So you get more of a closer look. But I like what the Pirates did getting probably the best power hitter in the draft at 4, who, by the way, Kumar Rocker last year got drafted and he came back to work on himself in one of the independent leagues. Came back and got drafted 3rd this year, which I was not expecting. I was expecting teams maybe try to get him in one of the later rounds, but they get a best power hitter at 4, and then they loaded up on pitching after that because they needed to. They didn't have much, but overall, I think I really didn't pay attention too much to what Cleveland did, but it's just I had to bring it up because you're talking about the young talent because both these teams they're getting younger. We talked about it yesterday with the league overall. Every team's getting younger, and guys are just getting faded out. Like we said with Howard Bullhouse, these guys are just getting past their careers, and it's worth. It's going to get younger too. We already think it is younger. It's going to get even more younger.
Right. I'm excited to see which direction baseball goes. I mean, you mentioned 4 straight years with 30 new All-Star participants, and each of them making their first appearances. So baseball is definitely going in a good direction. But, Mike, there's time to talk about the future of baseball. That comes in the offseason. We're at the halfway point. It's been a marathon so far. Now it's the sprint to the finish line. Outside, I think, of our top teams like New York, the Dodgers and Houston, who's, I think, your favorite team right now to make some noise here in the final, 3 months of the season?
Yeah, about 3-ish months. That's a tough question. Because, hey, we saw a team last year with the Braves that just barely got in. They go on to make a run. So it's kind of hard to look at now.
In these final few months. Is it Pittsburgh, 10.5 games back from a wild card, 11 games out of first?
Absolutely not.
Trying to give you some hope here, Mike.
I'm hopeful for the future, just not this year. I was never hopeful for this year. I remind you guys of that. I'm a reasonable fan with all my teams. I try to be.
How can you not be with the Pirates?
I'm used to losing.
You can't be a hopeful fan with the Pirates as your team. You can't go in every year and be like, yeah, this is our year, baby, because it's really not going to be.
It's not, but like I'm hopeful for the next couple of years. I'm serious about that.
I mean, third place this year could be good, especially if you can at least get some wins, make that number a little closer to 500 on the season.
Hey, let me point this out before I actually answer your question. Right now, they're in third place. They're, 15 games under, you're in third place. That's just how bad the division is. But if that continues, which it could be, we don't know because some guys are going to get traded at the trade deadline. The teams below them, too. The Cubs are going to sell probably. I don't know what the Reds are going to do because they just stink. I don't think they have anything to really sell. But I did remind you guys at the beginning of the year, I said the Pirates are going to suck, but I said they will not finish in last place. I'm looking good so far.
You are looking good in that stat. You got helped out by that early collapse of the Reds. So.
And the Cubs are even worse. So
right.
And I knew that
Cubs
going.
Also had a losing streak in there, I believe, at one point that was pretty bad. And they're only one game, or actually only half a game ahead of Cincinnati.
Yeah, but it's the bad division. We all knew that. But
to answer your question, St. Louis, I think they're starting to do something. They're clicking.
Those teams are good.
I think the right time. I think both those teams are clicking because St. Louis, they were struggling, I think, for a while there to find that momentum, find that role. And, now they put some butter and jelly on it. They're good to go. I'm excited to see that NL Central finish between Milwaukee and St. Louis. That should be an exciting battle to watch for these next couple of months. Obviously, pitching and hitting are both better on the side of St. Louis, but you just look at a team right now in Milwaukee that just continues to win. It doesn't really matter. They just keep winning games. I know they're on a 3-game skid, and they haven't had a good last 10, and they should be a lot farther ahead of St. Louis, but that's not going to last long. They have great players all around on that team. They won the Central last year. Look for them to be back. They had 97 wins last year. This is a team in Milwaukee. When healthy, they are one of the best teams in baseball. And St. Louis obviously put together, a good squad this year, a little bit of a dream squad, and they're looking to make that final run. We'll see what they can do. They got a wild card spot going in the NL at the moment, or they're right on the cusp of it, I should say. I believe Atlanta has one and San Diego has the other at the moment. We'll see how things turn out with those respectively, but it should be an exciting finish, no less.
And I'm looking at the National League side of it too, because that's what I have pulled up.
It should be more competitive than the AL. I think AL is getting really close to solidifying their final teams.
I think so, because you pretty much have the Yankees, and the other teams in their division are good, but I don't know if they're contending. I think Tampa Bay's having a good year, but not really what they were last year.
It looks at the moment that Tampa or Toronto is going to get a wild card spot. I wouldn't put money on Boston or Baltimore, but hey, Baltimore, they hit 500, man. They're finally up over that 500 mark. It feels like a long time coming. They do stand only 3.5 games back. If they hit another one of those streaks like we just saw them do, then not that long ago. I mean, I think it was just last week they were on a 10-plus game winning streak before they finally went down. They lost their last one out as well. But now they got the Yankees coming up here, and I think they could actually make some noise. And if Baltimore can give a little bit of a push, they're only 3.5 games back from a wild card. They hold advantages on both Tampa and Toronto at the moment. So they're in a spot. They're not that far out of the conversation, but I wouldn't bet on it because you've got amazing pitching over there with Tampa, with McClanahan, the best pitcher in baseball right now. Tampa, to me, looks like a wild card lock at this point.
And I think with Boston, I don't know. We'll have to see, because if they continue to come out of this All-Star break a little sluggish, they're a team that you could possibly mention. I don't know who it'd be, but they're a team that you can probably mention, hey, they might be selling some guys, because they're 3-7 in the last 10. That's a bad way to go into the All-Star breaks.
I do think Boston's in a sell mode, because this is not where they want to be. Their pitching is bad. They can hit the ball well, but I think they're going to look to move some key pieces to bring in some pitching for next season, because a team like Boston's going to attract free agents in the offseason. So I don't think they're going to worry about the hitting side of things. That's going to come for them. It always does. But I do think they go in the hunt for some pitchers here, some minor league style guys that they can put up into their program these next couple of years and allow them to blossom. That's when Boston's their best, when they can pull up some guys through their farm system and get things developed that way. When you see them try and compete with Yankees playing Yankee baseball, it doesn't work. They're not able to you can't buy a team that's better than the Yankees. That's the thing. You can build a team that can compete against the Yankees, but you're never going to outspend New York when it comes to baseball. They're just elite. They have more money than you, and they know it. I think Boston is in a sell mode looking for some young guys. So I would count Boston out. I like Toronto. They can hit the ball well, but their pitching bothers me. Their pitching is almost as bad as Boston this year. And when you look at Tampa on the other side, they can't hit it as well, which worries me come postseason, but they have some of the best pitching we see right now in the American League, especially with McClanahan at the helm. Tampa Bay looks like the safe lock in the AL East. At this point, Seattle's in a great spot to take the other wild card position down in the AL West because Texas, great moves right now by them. They're playing really good baseball. They have lost 4 in a row, but they had a bigger win streak going on before that. They're just 8 games below 500. I do like Texas. Obviously, I had them as one of my dark horses to make that playoff spot, especially that wild card spot at the beginning of the year, and to see them anywhere close to that conversation right now, I like it. I don't think it's going to happen. You saw Seattle just play some really great baseball. They're on a 14-game streak. Now they got Houston coming up. If they can take Houston and win the series, not necessarily a sweep, but if they can take, some games in this series, I really do think Seattle could potentially lock up that second wild card spot, which leaves my Guardians kind of out in the middle of nowhere, second place behind Minnesota, 2 games back. That's the one benefit Cleveland does have, those tiebreakers against Minnesota. So Cleveland could take over, still 2 wins under what Minnesota would be. And Minnesota's going up against Detroit. Cleveland's got Chicago coming up. Chicago's a 500 team that's not out of the conversation to take the AL Central either. But Mike, in the Central, I don't think they're getting a wild card spot this year again.
No, I think it's very likely. I think Cleveland can maybe get in there, but I think it's likely that a wild card's not going to come out of that division. I'm still a little cautious when you look at Seattle over there because they've played good right now, but we haven't seen that all season long. They have really good pitching. That's what's been helping them. Their bats are now heating up. But when you look across into the AL East and you got a 50-43 Toronto squad, and we saw the AL East take 2 wild card spots last year, Seattle's going to be feeling some pressure here very rapidly as the AL East gets even more competitive because Tampa Bay, they got Kansas City going up. That should be an easy sweep for them. Toronto's got a difficult set against Boston, which if Boston wins, they'd actually overtake Toronto as the 3 spot in the East. But if you see Toronto go and take them, I think the pressure is on for Seattle to continue to perform. 14-game win streak right now. The record stands at 22 from Cleveland a couple of years ago. They're only 8 games off that, but that's going to be a hard 8 games, especially with Houston coming up. Those are going to be fun battles to watch. It's something we're trying to look forward to open up the second, quote-unquote, second half. But I think Seattle, like you said, they're there's some guys in their lineup that aren't even – their offense has been good, but some guys that haven't woken up yet. A guy that I'm familiar with Adam Frazier. He's a guy that comes over with 237 average. I think 3 home runs I saw, and he only has 24 RBIs. That's not the type of player he is. So if they can get guys like that to wake up too, they could be a lock, like you're kind of saying Tampa Bay is to get a wild card. And that leaves 1 spot open. Toronto's going to fight for it. Boston, we'll have to see what happens with them too.
I don't love Boston. They've just been so streaky this year, and I think that final push of the season, those streaky teams tend to kind of fall back down to earth.
I think you can go down. I'm looking at the wildcard standings now. You can probably go down to Chicago. That's probably, or you could probably throw Texas in there. I don't know if I think the Angels at 10.5. I think it's too hard for them. They haven't shown anything outside of that first month of the season. So I think you're probably looking at, you got Tampa, Seattle, and Toronto right now in the top 3. Then you got Boston, Cleveland, Baltimore, Chicago, the White Sox, and then the Rangers. So you got 5 teams underneath that still have a legit chance.
I think Rangers might be a bit far out. I know they're my dark horse team, and I do like them, but they're another team, streaky, and you don't trust streaky down this final stretch of the season. That's the only thing that I think you might have that problem with is they're so streaky. They haven't had that consistency. We'll see what Corey Seager, if he can continue to light things up with the bat, that could be a good way. They have a really bright future. I think when you look at these wild card teams and you go, this is exactly where a team should be. Baltimore, this is perfect season for them. 500 right now. You're working your young talent into the system, and it's working really well. Texas, same way. Both those teams are in great rebuild modes. They're at the perfect spot of it. Seattle, this is kind of their jump season. One of those random seasons I think you just see kind of pop in there, kind of like Miami had a couple years ago, jumped up, got a playoff spot for some reason, and then went right back down to crap the next year. This kind of feels like that for Seattle. We'll see if they can keep it up, but we know they have a 20-year playoff drought going on in that city. We'll see if they can finally get through that this year.
It just feels like it's I don't want to say meant to happen, but it was kind of trending towards that because last year at the end of the year I think they missed the playoffs by one game. And this year they come in, they start a little bit slow, and they've ripped off, 14?
14 right now.
So give them credit, too, because, hey, these players weren't around last time. They don't know too much of the history. A lot of them probably aren't from there. But this organization's tired of missing the playoffs. It's been way too long. They keep seeing the stuff on social media. And, I hope this isn't a streaky part because we see teams that are really hot going into the All-Star break and come out and struggle. That's the key for them to start out strong. I know you said that they have Houston coming out, but you have them at home, though. So if you could beat a team like that at home, do what you're supposed to do, then look at their schedule coming out after that. They got the Rangers, and they have to go to Houston. And it's tough after that. You got to go to the Yankees, play the Angels, and host the Yankees again. It's really not – that's the key is if you're going to rip off 14 in a row, put yourself in the second wildcard spot, come out and not start slow. That's the big key. And show everybody you're not a fluke because people can go on winning streaks. I mean, and same thing with Baltimore. They're kind of in the spot, too, that they're in position to 3.5 out of the wild card. Don't come out when people are questioning you, and you play as well as you have been. Don't give it all away. That's the big thing, that you can't come out and start sluggish.
Yeah, 100%. Well, Mike, we got half an hour left in the show. I think we've talked baseball enough today. We'll pick up some more tomorrow as games start back up out of the All-Star break. But as promised yesterday, I worked on my predictions for the entire college football season, and I have them ready to show off. So I went through all 131 teams, their records. This is the standings at the end of 2022 for college football regular season. It didn't go into conference games.
By the way, how long did this take you? This had been a headache.
Yeah, I did have a big headache at the end of it from staring at my screen for so long, but I think it was about 2.5 hours I worked on before the show, probably a good hour and a half I did after as well. So 4 hours in total, I think, throughout the day. But without any further ado, here's the ACC. We'll go to conference by conference here. Clemson, they take the top spot. They got an easy schedule this year. 12-0, I don't think is out of the picture. They got some hard games along the way, sure, but it's nothing I don't think this team can overcome. You're going into the second season now with DJ Uiagalelei at quarterback. Yeah, he hasn't lived up to the hype, but you got to watch out for some of these quarterbacks that are going to develop. NC State, they had a good year last year. I'm really excited to see if they can return to prominence. Wake Forest, I have taken a step down. Having, Sam Hartman finally graduate their fifth-year senior, that's going to hurt their status a little bit. I think they're going to struggle to win some of those big games without that lock at quarterback. I love what Jeff Hafley's doing at Boston College. 8-4 feels like a very realistic schedule. They got some favorable matchups throughout the year that so long as they win those games that they should be able to take that fourth spot in the ACC Atlantic. After them, Florida State, I'm not too high, not too low. A 500 season seems about right. They've been trying to turn things around, but I don't think it comes to fruition. They got a little bit more of a difficult schedule. I'm a little concerned about their lack of success recently, that they're going to be able to turn something around, but they do have a favorable schedule for a good portion. Same with Louisville. They got a good schedule for a lot of it, but then they have some of those hard games that you just know they're not going to come out on top of. So they go 6-6. Syracuse, not a football school really, 2-10. I don't see much success. The coastal side of the ACC yet again is quiet. Virginia, I actually have coming out at 8-4. Miami ties them with 8-4, but the head-to-head matchup goes over to the Cavaliers and got the first season under Cristobal. I think the first season for Cristobal, if he goes 8-4 with Miami, should be considered a success.
I agree.
I think if you see that turnaround from this school, especially because he didn't pull in a ton of transfers like Lincoln Riley did with USC, he came in, took a look at what they had and started building from there. If he can get that to 8-4, which I think is possible, considering I don't love a lot of the bottom teams coaching-wise, especially in this ACC. I think the ACC has a lot of coaching flaws in retrospect to a couple of the other conferences. So An 8-4 season for Miami is good, but they fall just short of taking the Coastal Division. I got Pitt finishing 7-5, obviously taking some losses this year. No more Kenny Pickett. My thing with him, I'm feeling same way West Virginia felt after they lost Will Greer to graduation. Kind of a slow fall back to earth. They lost Will Greer down in West Virginia. They haven't had any success since. Pitt, I think they got a little bit left. Right, no Addison as well. They got a little bit left, not a lot. I think it's enough to hold on to a 7-5 season. They get the win over Virginia Tech at one point, which breaks that tiebreaker as well. Virginia Tech, I don't love them, don't hate them. 7-5. I actually had Virginia Tech and Virginia kind of bouncing around a couple times this season, but I got Virginia taking down Virginia Tech. I don't know why I like the Cavaliers this season, but I think they're one of those teams in the ACC, especially when you look at this Coastal, that really they don't have to do much, I think, to take this side. The stronger portion is the Atlantic. Feels much like the Big Ten East. Whoever is on this, western side of the Coastal is going to have an easier path to that ACC championship game, where they ultimately will lose to Clemson, as we have seen in every year past. UNC, they continue to disappoint when it comes to football. 6-6 seems reasonable. I got Duke at 4-8. They got some harder games on the schedule. I don't love what they got all in all. They have a really phenomenal punter who's up for the preseason Ray Guy Award. I've got to mention that punter, Porter Wilson, from my hometown, punted at my high school as well for my senior year. Really great punter. Actually, a soccer player who transferred over into the football side of things and got the full ride down to Duke. And he's been showing out, and he's on the list for Ray Guy. He was top 10 in average punt yards last year. I'm excited to see what that can do. But hopefully Duke doesn't have to use him too much. That's the biggest problem. He's up on those lists so much because he has to punt all the time. So maybe Duke can turn something around, but they're a basketball school, not a football school. Georgia Tech, we've talked about it. They're terrible. Those 2 wins on their schedule are what I've been calling purchased wins as I was putting things together. They put some games in there against some lower grade FCS or some low grade FBS schools to try and just purchase a couple wins, make that schedule look a little bit nicer along the way, buy some wins, as I keep referring to it as. So, Mike, what are your thoughts here on the ACC?
I think
this list I have going.
I'll say it's pretty accurate. I don't remember if we were on the show yesterday, if we were talking off the show about Clemson. I think it's I don't know about 12-0 because it's hard to do, but it's possible that they have another bounce back year because we ran through their schedule. It's pretty favorable.
Yeah, I think we're talking about it after the show yesterday.
First of all, the division they play in is favorable, and their out-of-conference games aren't that strong. So that's favorable for them. NC State I kind of like too is at 11-1. Boston College, a team I think I told you after the show yesterday, it was a team I liked last year, so I think that's a good spot.
And they got local Cheney product and Clive Wilson coming in.
Yeah.
Excited to see him perform. I hope he gets some reps first year. That'll be exciting to see him.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. And I think from the Atlantic side of it, I think it's pretty much how it's going to turn out. Maybe Wake Forest and Boston College will be fighting out for second, but I like NC State too. Everybody else is pretty much – you can put them anywhere you want. I think for the Coastal, I think Virginia's likely. We've seen a team – I think they won it the last couple of years. Within the last few years, they've won one Coastal Division. So that's – because it's pretty weak. This is the weak side of this conference. I think I agree with you with Cristobal down at 8-4 with Miami. That's a good year because, like you said, they've been bad the last time for many years. You didn't really get too many transfers. You don't really have your own recruits yet. 8-4, I think it's good. And 8-4, depending on how other things go,
you can get there too.
8-4, depending on how things go, that you could probably win the Coastal. You have an 8-4 team winning that, depending on other things.
I mean, if that game flips between Virginia and Miami, that was just the way I was putting together. I picked Miami spot on, and that's the way it fell. But I mean, yeah, if Miami gets that win, they then turn into a 9-3 team, and Virginia would fall down 7-5, same as Pitt, Virginia Tech. And the momentum, especially coming off of a win like that for Miami, could really propel them well into the rest of the season.
Yeah, and moving down, I think with Pitt, that's likely because you're losing a lot there. You're losing a big part of your offense. I think that's a good.
But I think they can become bowl eligible with the favorable schedule.
I think they're gonna be bowl eligible. Yeah, I'm looking at their schedule now. Their conference is favorable, but I like playing Tennessee again. That's a nice one they added last year.
I think they dropped the Tennessee. I am buying in a little bit to the Tennessee hype this year. They got a good schedule.
And I love having the backyard brawl back with West Virginia and Pitt. That's awesome. They need to get Penn State back involved in that because those 3 teams playing each other was legendary. But
it needs to happen.
It needs to happen again. But
there's Youngstown State involved. We can take West Virginia.
Yeah, right.
Maybe
all 3 will wax them, but no, I don't know. They lost a lot, but they've done better recruiting the last couple of years. Pat Narduzzi's gotten to be a better coach. I'm still not sold on him yet, so I don't know what they're really going to do this year. But I think 7-5 around that's a good start for it because they could be better than that.
It's a good start to rebuild without Pickett and Addison.
That's a good preseason prediction. I think 7-5. It's accurate. It could be a little bit better. It could be a little bit worse. But like you just said, Addison, that's a big loss there. That's a big part of them last year. And I think everything else after that's pretty accurate with everybody else.
All right. Well, let's move over into the Power 6 division, the American. I got Cincinnati going undefeated. This was a very narrow one. There's a couple of games. Cincinnati, to me, is either a 3-loss team or undefeated. Somewhere in that margin, they have a good schedule. They've made it a little bit more competitive. They got some Power 5 opponents coming up on the schedule this year. I think they're going to have some hard games. But if Cincinnati continues to perform the way they do, we're going to see how they are without Ritter. It's really the first time in Fickell's franchise here with Cincinnati that he's going to be working with a new quarterback. But I bet Fickell's had a guy grooming right behind Desmond Ritter this last season and a half, whatever it has been. I imagine Fickell's got somebody ready to take over. They're going to have to find a replacement in the secondary for Sauce Gardner. They're also having to bring in a new secondary coach who went to Ohio State and made that move. So I think there's some rebuilding to be done at Cincinnati. But with what we've seen out of Fickell, I think he's going to have this team ready to go back, try and make it. I think even undefeated this year with the field we got going on, I don't think Cincinnati makes the college football playoff.
I don't know either.
This year. As we go farther down the list of schools, I think you'll kind of see why I have that feeling when I was putting together these records.
I'm looking at the schedule too, and people need to understand that I don't think they're going to go undefeated. Even though Arkansas is not, they were okay for most parts last year.
They're good this season.
That's a hard place to go and play. They got Indiana again too. That we know Big Ten, they're not great, but they're a competitive team. And all these other teams in the American are always competitive. Eastern Carolina always has a good team, or somewhat good team. Tulane or Tulsa, a team last year that ended up losing to Ohio State, but challenged them. SMU had a better year last year. This is a hard conference.
Was great last year.
Yeah, they had a good year, and even Tulane, I wouldn't. They're not great either.
I like Tulane. I mean, they had a couple close games that I think I gave to Tulsa. I gave to SMU. That really, I mean, Tulane can be a 9-win squad if they pull out some tight ones along the way. That really goes for, I think, any of these American teams. They could all really, I think, Houston up can and will all be bowl eligible. I don't love the teams under them. I like Memphis, but not enough to push them. I don't have great confidence with Navy this year. They can't throw the ball well. USF, I don't know why I'm not buying into their program this year. Temple, they get some nice ones along the way. Nothing great. UCF is a 4-8 squad in my book. They're not what they used to be. I think they can get some fun wins going on, though, down there in Spectrum Stadium. We'll see what they got going on. But this American should be interesting this year. I like East Carolina, the Pirates. I like SMU. I like Tulsa. I like Tulane. This American, they're really building up a strong top half. I think in some of this conference realignment we got coming up, I think you're going to see the American Conference really get destroyed because they're going to lose a lot of these teams out to the Big 12. I mean, we're already seeing Cincinnati and Houston making that move over to the Big 12 here in the next couple of years after Oklahoma and Texas depart for the SEC. You're going to see that go. East Carolina, if they continue going this way, I think you could see them potentially joining the ACC, becoming another Carolina school in those area. SMU, if they continue to perform, who's to say they're not next on the short list for the Big 12 or even the SEC? I think they got a potential move, though, on their way down into the Sun Belt Conference if this American kind of falls apart. So I think there's some interesting developments going on throughout this American.
That's another one I think is pretty accurate, too. Cincinnati, clearly, I think still – I think it's more retooling than rebuilding, like you kind of said. Right. Luke Fickell has become a good recruiter, and it seems like – he hasn't had this quarterback yet, but some other positions they've lost over the last couple of years, he's been there. They do a good job of retooling and plugging guys in. And we know he's a good coach. I know he's your boy too, so he's going to find ways to do it.
Right.
I think they're still clearly the best team in this conference, but I think East Carolina is a very close second, I think.
Yeah, well, moving on, Big 12. I think this one's an interesting one. I got Iowa State coming out on top, 11-1. I like them. I was reading some articles while I was putting this list together. A lot of people are thinking, especially down in the Iowa area, obviously, that this might be the best team they got coming back. And it's hard to argue. They got a lot of returning talent. We saw a good team last year with a great defense behind them. I like them. I had Baylor actually dominating the majority of the Big 12 season, and they lose. I have them losing in week 4, and then I have them dropping the final game of the season to Iowa State. So I think it'll be fun battle between those two. Must watch television. I got Sarkisian with Texas going 9-3. I like their schedule this year, and that's a big part of it for this team. And I think second year Sarkisian's going to let this offense kind of go loose. I hope he can finally open the door up for this team and get some of that offensive ingenuity he had at Alabama going with this team. Full year and a half now under his lead. Hopefully he's got something put together for this upcoming season. I'm not saying Texas is back because I don't have him in the Big 12 championship game, but I think Texas is coming up.
They're coming back, I think. Yeah.
Coming
Not
up
this year.
Right. And I think a 9-win season right now is something Texas fans are hoping for. Obviously, they went undefeated, but realistic Texas fans, there's not many of them, but I think realistic ones are thinking 9-3. That sounds pretty good in their books. Oklahoma got 9-3 as well. They do still have a ton of talent. I mean, just because they lose Lincoln Riley, I don't want to throw them off the horse right away. They got some good talent left over after the Riley move and a couple of transfers out. I don't think they're going to completely fall off. I don't think we see that level of dominance, but I think the two SEC teams, future SEC teams in Texas and Oklahoma, battle it out for that third spot behind Iowa State and Baylor. I like K-State this year. They continue to be competitive in the Big 12. They got some nice pieces, and they have one of the stronger defensive units I think we see in the Big 12 outside of Iowa State and Baylor. They're a team you definitely got to watch for. Mike Gundy in Oklahoma State. I love Mike Gundy as a coach. He's one of those guys. I think if I was going into college football, not a 5-star recruit, maybe a 3 or a 4, Oklahoma State would be on a short list of guys I want to go to because Mike Gundy is just one of those guys that I think you got to play for at some point. He's great at producing high-level offensive talent, and his defense has been improving. I'm excited to see what they do. TCU's not much of a program this year. They always start out well, finish bad. Kansas, same thing. There's nothing there. Texas Tech and West Virginia have a couple of purchased wins, which make them look a little bit better, but I'm not sold on any of them.
I think it's the Big 12 isn't normally that strong, but I think it's, Oklahoma, I don't think they're going to completely fall off, but 9-3, if they're going to slip back a little bit, kind of similar to what they had last year, I think it's pretty wide open this year. I think it leaves the door open for Iowa State to go 11-1 and win it, or even a team like Baylor, even a team like Texas. I don't think it's that type of year for them, but I think it's that type of wide open where a team like that can maybe get on a run and do something.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting.
I don't have Texas winning a lot of their big games either. I have them losing majority of those big tight games, but when they go up against Texas Tech and West Virginia and TCU, they're getting a lot of those bigger wins in those games, and that's where they're kind of beefing up that record of 9-3. I think you got to take some of these records a little past face value because you see a 9-3 and you go, well, there's no way. You kind of scoff at it, but then if you actually go and kind of look at these schedules, feel out the momentum of the season as you're putting together everything, I think Texas has a chance to kind of make some noise through weeks. What do I got here? 3 through 6. I think they go on a nice win streak, and they got another easy slate from the 11th through the 13th, those weeks, that I think they can make some nice moves and they can take some wins along the way.
Yeah, I think that's pretty. I think that's 9-3. Like, people think that's a bad season in college football. It's not. 9-3 is a good season.
It's a bad season if you're Nick Saban.
Well, yeah, but I think people are so focused on it, and it's just the nature of how it is. I've talked about it a few times. You have to go undefeated. You can only lose one game. 9-3 is not a bad record. You're just not going to get the playoffs. That's all.
Right. You're still going to get a nice bowl game.
Yeah.
There's some potential for this Big 12 to see a couple, maybe I would say at least 2 New Year's 6 games potentially out of it. I mean, if they get a couple more out of Texas and Oklahoma, so be it. But I think they got some nice moves this year, and I think you're going to see a grand finale for the Big 12 with Oklahoma and Texas.
And I think the same thing with Oklahoma. If they can go 9-3, that's a good year. Just losing Lincoln Riley is one of the better ones. Really good year. And it's some guys they lost too that Lincoln Riley took with them.
Yeah, 100%. Well, here's our conference. Big Ten. We got 15 minutes. Let's break this down. Number 1, you knew I kind of had to go Ohio State. They do have an easier schedule, and one loss is kind of the bitters. They're right now second favorite team in college football to win the national championship. They're second on the ESPN Football Power Index, just behind Alabama. Both are predicted to go 11-1. But I got Ohio State beat Michigan in that final game. That's the big one. I am really worried, however, about that Penn State game. I think if you look throughout the schedule and you kind of look along those bad weeks of 9 and 10 where we see a lot of upsets in college football coming along, that's when Ohio State's going up against the likes of Penn State. And when you look at that kind of thing, I think you got to watch out for that upset card along the way for Ohio State. That's the one. I'm buying into Maryland this year. I don't have 100% reasoning for it, but Taulia, their quarterback, the younger brother of Tua Tagovailoa, yeah, he's still there, and he's rated as one of the best quarterbacks right now in the Big Ten, and I don't think that's a very deep class to go through, but I think when you have good quarterback play, we've seen it in the Big Ten. If you have a good quarterback, you will compete, and that's why I got Maryland going 8-4, because I think you look at the entire conference, you look at best quarterbacks, Taulia is on that list. And when you have a good quarterback, you can compete here. I got Michigan 11-1. They should have a good return. I don't think they're going to have enough, though, to beat Ohio State again. So that's the one thing I'm going to drop them on. Mike, Penn State, I got them going 7-5. I kept wanting to give them wins. I really did over a couple other opponents. But every time I just went, I can't trust Penn State at this point in time. After back-to-back kind of 500 seasons, I'm not ready to buy back into Penn State. And, like you've said, and Matt said before, wait until Drew Allard comes. Then let's really see if this Penn State recruiting can kind of turn something around for him. And I agree. Once Drew Allard gets the reins here, I'm willing to, maybe buy back a little bit to Penn State if he proves himself. But with their current quarterback situation, I'm just not buying into Penn State. With Michigan State right behind him at 7-5, I have Penn State beating Michigan State at some point in this season. I don't think Michigan State is going to do it this year because they don't have Kenneth Walker. You look at so many games last year. Kenneth Walker III was the reason they were so good. They won games because he could run the football. They don't have that this year. They don't have a superstar quarterback either. 7-5, barely bowl eligible, reasonable for the division. Rutgers, I have going bad again, 3-9. Is it too late to kick them back out? Indiana, 2-10. They're terrible, man. I cannot trust Indiana whatsoever to win a football game. That's the way I got there. The western side of the Big Ten is going to be fun this year. When I was putting together this schedule, I had so much fun when I got to matchups with these West teams. I have Minnesota out on top, and really, I have them at 10-2 because I love PJ Fleck as a coach. We've seen what he's done with really next to nothing. He's turned 3-star guys into second-round picks in the NFL. When you have a young head coach like that who's able to turn talent around quickly, I think it opens the door, especially right now when the West doesn't really have a superstar standout anywhere in their ranks, to potentially open the door for Minnesota to be that team to kind of set the tempo for the Big Ten West. It feels like the way things are going there. We do know there's a lot of turmoil, though, in this side where you get a lot of upsets and teams beat each other up. You're not going to see a playoff team out of the western side of the Big Ten. You're going to see some fun teams, though. I got Nebraska at 9-3. And before anyone goes, Nebraska 9-3, you got to remember, this was the second best offense in the Big Ten last year behind Ohio State. This team lost 7 games that were 1 or 2 possession ball games. If those turn around, if they get a little bit more out of their defense, Nebraska will be a 9-3 team. I'm not saying this is Scott Frost's redemption year, but it's his final swan song if he doesn't do something. It's his final goodbye for his former alma mater. He's got to do something. And as I kind of mentioned before, with the opening I think the Big Ten West has this year and how good they were last year in a lot of games, I think it's possible Nebraska can turn this to a 9-3 season. That was one of those kind of wishful thinking picks. I want to see if they can do it. Wisconsin, I got an 8-4. I wanted to push them harder, but my issues continuously go, who is their guy? I don't really know what they're going with at quarterback or running back. You know they're going to be good running the football. I don't think they're balanced enough to have a 10-win season, though, offensively. They're going to have good defense. You know that's why they're only having 4 losses. Northwestern, Pat Fitzgerald, he's due for one of those up years again. If you look at his records throughout the years, it's gone a certain way. 2 bad years, 2 good years, 2 bad years, 2 good years. He's had some down years. According to statistics and history, Northwestern's due for a good year. 8-4 would be a good year in that retrospect. They have a terrible recruiting class. They shouldn't win a football game, but I'm going with history here because it's history for a reason. There's been a pattern that's been put down for Northwestern. I want to see if it holds true. I like Purdue this year. I only have them going 6-6 though, because of you see how competitive this West is. I think there's a lot of jumping onto other teams and taking a game here, taking a game there. Same with Iowa and Illinois. I'm buying into Illinois a little bit this year. I don't love them, but I think they can steal some wins along the way. In Iowa, as much as I love Kirk Ferentz, he's not working with anything on this offense. And I know he still wins when that's the case. But I think this is a year. I don't love the tight end unit as much, which is where they're the best. The wide receiver core is a little mediocre. No quarterback really to speak of. Before I were to give them a winning record, I got to see what they do.
I think this is another. I think Iowa's due for a down year too. I think they're another type of team like Northwestern. It's usually 1 year good, 1 year bad, more often than Northwestern. But I want to believe you on Nebraska. I'm going to kind of use the same argument that you use with Penn State, that I don't trust them.
Right.
So I'd like to see 9-3. I want to see them do a lot better. And after the last year they had last year, that's frustrating. You have a top 2 offense in a conference, you stink. But I think Minnesota is probably the team that comes out of the West. East, it's going to be Ohio State again. If Michigan could beat them. That's the big. They did it last year. Again, they could do 2 years in a row now.
Factor.
Yeah, it's
if that's the thing. There's a lot of ifs, especially for this Big Ten this year.
For all of these too, but I know you kind of every year I've known you've done this with. And I'm just being honest, trying to be honest. With my teams, I try. Like I just said, I try to be honest with them. I just can't see them Penn State beating Ohio State until it actually happens. I think that's a fair thing to say. I know it's an Ohio State fan, like you're looking at it too. You're right in saying that. It's that point of the year. They're one of the teams that always plays Ohio State close. You think 1 year it's going to come their way,
right?
But it's just
only happened the once.
Yeah, and it was a luck one there. But ever since Penn State turned around that year, they haven't been able to beat them. That's the thing. And I just don't think. Other than that, look at the 3 road games Penn State's got to play. Yeah, they got to go start out at Purdue, go to Auburn, then play at Michigan. Those are 3 really hard games that they probably could lose all 3 of them. I think they can maybe. I know you're talking about the last week. I think they're going to start out with a win in Purdue. I think they may lose Auburn. They probably will lose Michigan. But
that's actually that game, Penn State versus Purdue. I do have Penn State losing that first game, but then after that, I have them going on a 4-game win streak until they're bye.
I don't know if I trust Auburn, but it's just the fact they have to go there and play there. It's hard.
Right. I do like Auburn a little bit this year, not enough. I mean, we'll get down to the SEC here probably on tomorrow's show, but I do kind of like what Auburn has going on this year, and they have a favorable schedule. But this is one of those games. I think Penn State's loss at Purdue to start out the year, I think kind of invigorates them. Then they go play some MAC teams in Ohio at Central Michigan after Auburn. I think they can really set their sights on taking that Auburn game. It's a 3:30 game, so you're not going to get that ruckus environment that you would from a 7 p.m. game or an 8 p.m. game like what's going to be going on in Purdue. You're going to get that mid-afternoon game. It's a little hotter, a little slower. I think that bodes well to what this Penn State team can do if you slow things down, and I think they can take that Auburn game. Then I think they can beat Northwestern. I think that's a very real situation. I know I like Northwestern this year, but I think that's a game Penn State should win. But then you go into Michigan, Minnesota, and Ohio State in 3 consecutive weeks.
Yeah,
that is a death sentence for any Big Ten team to go into, not just Penn State. And I think it's possible they take one of those games. I think it's very possible. But when I was putting this together, that's really the bad skid. I have them going on a 3-game drop. And that's where you see this go from a 10-2 season to a 7-5 when you're going up against arguably, at least on this list, the 3 best teams in the Big Ten this upcoming season. A 12-win team, 11-win team, and a 10-win team is really the killer for Penn State. And then after that, I only have Penn State losing it one more time, and that comes at home against Maryland. And that's only because I'm buying into what Maryland has this season, because we've seen kind of a jump up. And I think this is the year you might see that happen. So an 8-4 season, very realistic for Penn State, because I think Maryland's my long shot here in the Big Ten of way as I was going with this. I didn't want to go too status quo on it, because we always see somebody make that move and something's a little different. I think Maryland's got that case this year with a good quarterback.
I'm not saying I trust Sean Clifford, but I think he's somewhat better than people give him credit for. I think this is the last year. I'm not saying it's going to be some great year, but I think it's a year that, why not make this last year your best one? I know everybody says that too, but I think it's a year that this could potentially be set up around him too, because I like the wide receiver transfer I said they got from Western Kentucky, I think it was, with Tinsley, who was a leading receiver last year in college football. I think he was like top 5, I think. I like that, and some other piece we talked about last week, but it's remained to be seen. It's a team, just my pro team with the Cowboys. I'm always so hopeful, and then it happens, and it doesn't go their way. There's always something that goes against them, but you don't know. You're just excited to have this happen again, because every year, I'm looking at their schedule every year. There's always right in the middle of part of their schedule, three or four hard games in a row. Same thing again this year. But if you want to start competing in the Big Ten, you got to win all those.
Yeah,
or at least maybe go 2-3.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there on board with that. And the other team, I want to talk about here, and when I say I like this team to have a good record in Nebraska, look at their schedule. They're starting off against Northwestern in Dublin, Ireland, by the way. That's going to be fun to watch. An 11:30 game in Ireland. I'm excited to watch that. I don't care if it's bad. But then they got a game against North Dakota. Obviously a good team down here in the FCS. But at the FBS level, I don't think they're going up against North Dakota. They're going to lose to North Dakota in Lincoln, Nebraska. I don't see that happening, not in Memorial Stadium. Then they're hosting Georgia Southern, another team I don't love. I don't hate this year, but I don't think they're going to have a phenomenal year down there in the Sun Belt. Then they got Oklahoma. And through the first 4 games of the year, I have Nebraska going 2-2 because we know they can't win those big games. I have them falling Northwestern overseas. I have them losing to Oklahoma. But then they go into the Big Ten schedule, and you got Indiana, Rutgers, Purdue, Illinois as your first 4 Big Ten games. That sets up well for Nebraska. Coming off of a bye, by the way, as well. They're going to have a bye in that week 4 because of their first week they play in week 0 over there in Ireland. So they get an early season bye. They're going to have 2 on the season, and I think that goes well. They're going to come out of the bye, and they go up against Indiana, Rutgers, Purdue. I think they take all 3 of those, and then after that, they're going to get another bye come out of it as their actual bye week, and then I think they finish off the season 4-1 because after that, they're going to have Illinois, Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, which is the heart of their schedule. That's where it's going to be the most difficult. But if they get off to such a hot start with those out-of-conference games and can take that early piece of the Big Ten schedule, I think it sets momentum in their corner, and momentum in football is huge.
I mean, they're a team, though, that we're saying it looks favorable, but they're a team that we're normally saying that against, like last year and the last couple of years. But I think it's set up that they could maybe do something this year. I didn't get a hook. You're right. I don't trust it, but I hope you're right.
I want to see Scott Foss finally do something. I loved what he did down UCF, and he hasn't had that same success. It's got to show up at some point, is my hope.
Yeah. Let's make it this year.
Yep, that's going to do it here for the Casual Sports Podcast. We'll get to the rest of the conferences more on the show tomorrow.
Oh, by the way, quick shout out. I meant to say this earlier when we were talking about the Pirates. Today's National Pennsylvania Day. I got to throw that out there.
All righty. Well, there you go. We'll have to go venture across the border to get some ice cream.
Yeah.
That's going to do it. Power Hour up next on your sports network.